What is up, guys? Welcome to another video. Another video means another dopamine high. Said that buy something that feels something, and today we're back at it with another review. I've been gone for a minute and I do apologize, and we do have a brand new review that is Halo related. No Star Wars stuff, no NECA stuff. I know I've been on a huge spree with those two companies, but today we are looking at a Jazwares product, and that is Jazwares Halo, the Spartan Collection Jega. I hope I'm saying that right. It is the Spartan Killer. It is our second elite in the Spartan Collection, and I'm very excited to break down this figure. And if you do want to get this figure yourself, he is an Amazon exclusive for $34.99, and he doesn't seem to be going out of stock anytime soon, at least from what I've seen. So if you want to go pick him up, link in the description below to go do that. And with all that said, let's get into the video. So taking a look at the box, we get a good look of the boy, we get a good look at his name and all the accessories that are included with the figure. Then looking at the side, we get some artwork of the boy, and then flipping over to the back, we actually get another big picture of the figure with everything listed that is included. And then on the bottom, we have Wave 7 of the Spartan Collection. It is happening. We're getting Fred, Halo 3 Chief, Alice, and the Spartan Yokai. So very excited to see this wave and see if Jazwares has improved upon the issues that I bitch about in almost every review I do. But with all that said, let's open up this box and review the figure. And jumping into articulation, starting off with the head region of the figure, you can't get him to rotate his head 360 degrees due to the neck armor clashing with his combat harness. So despite not being able to get that 360 rotation, the range of motion is wide nonetheless. And then you can have him bop his head up and down if you wanted him to do that for whatever reason. And actually, one thing they did improve upon the range of motion and articulation for this figure is he can now look side to side. With Arbiter, you couldn't have him do that. He can only look straight, and you'd have to move his entire body if you want him to look in any other direction. But with this figure, you can now have him look side to side, so it's good to see that improvement there. But despite this improvement, the head articulation for this figure is still very iffy and mid at best. Then moving over to arms, and he has two different types of arms, so we're gonna look at those at the same time. You can rotate his arms 360 degrees when flapping them up or bringing them up. The robotic arm can go up a little bit more because there's less armor clashing with the combat harness, whereas on the biological arm, he has that shoulder piece clashing with his combat harness. With forearms, you can bring his biological forearm up all the way, and it's a very good range of motion, so very good to see that there. Originally, I thought he wasn't able to, so I have this weird cut in the video, so I apologize for that. And then with the robotic arm, he can bring his arm up all the way as well. But one thing about the forearm with the robotic arm is that the blade does clash with the bicep, so you do have to move the blade over to the side a little bit in order for him to bring his forearm up. So yeah, just keep that in mind with the robotic arm. And then moving over to the hands, there are two different types of hands on this figure. Now starting off with the biological one, it just works like any other Spartan Collection hand, rotate 360 degrees and bend however you please. And then moving over to the robotic arm, it's pretty much the same principle. It's built different, but you can bend it however you want and rotate it pretty much however you want. I will say that the forearm does kind of clash with his wrist, so do what you will with that information. But I do think it's cool that they did cater towards his robotic arm by having his hands operate differently. Then looking at his torso, there is no torso articulation. This is a Jazwares Spartan Collection figure after all, but despite the slander on the torso, there is a little bit of nudging that you can do. But yeah, you're not really moving his torso at all, and it's unfortunate to see. And finally, taking a look at his legs, you can rotate his legs 360 degrees. It's always good to see that range of motion there. And then I wouldn't call them a split, but you can't, I don't know if this is even considered a split, but you can open up his legs if you wanted him to do so. And then moving down to the knee, or what is, I don't know, the anatomy of elites confuse me, but going to his knee, you can move it back and forth a very good amount, and then you can also rotate it independently from the thigh if you wanted to as well. Really good for balancing and poses. And then going to his I want to say his ankle. I don't know if that's what you would call this part of his body, but you can move that back and forth and rotate it independently as well. So a lot of independent moving parts on the leg, which is always good to see, allows for better balancing and posing. And then going down to the feet. The feet are a little iffy, a little weird, a little bad. You can't really rotate them at all. You can kind of pivot them, but that's really about it. You can't even bend them back and forth. And then the toes, you can bend back and forth, or up and down I should say, and you can bend them independently. They don't move together for better balancing of the figure. So overall, despite the feet, I think that the leg articulation for this figure is good. I like the range of motion that he does have, and for the articulation overall on this figure, it is very hit or miss depending on what spot of the body you are referring to. There's some spots where there's good articulation and others where there's not. And with all that said, let's move on to the accessories. And I didn't know where to throw this in the video, so I'm throwing this in between articulation and accessories. But the blades on his arm do not come off. You can't remove them at all. They are there forever to stay, and I think that's a real big bummer, because in the game they're not always on. They can turn on and off, and you know, they could have easily done a peg hole system, make it so you can remove and you know attach the blades, but they didn't do that, and I don't know why, and it just kind of hinders some of the accessories that you'll see later on. Starting off with the first weapon included, and that is his Blood Blade energy sword. This is just the infinite mold with red instead of blue. There's the effects that they have painted on, and it looks really solid. I have no complaints about the visuals, and it just has a black handle instead of the normal gray one that we're used to seeing. So overall, just a simple, just cool red energy sword that we get with our figure. And for our next weapon, we do have the Pulse Carbine. Now, I think the sculpt and the paint job of this weapon looks really good. I think they nailed it with all the little details and all the indents and curves on the weapon, but there are a few issues I do have with this accessory, or at least how the figure handles this accessory. My first issue with the Pulse Carbine, or at least how the figure handles it, is that the hand designated to the Pulse Carbine, the trigger finger hand, does not want to hold it properly, or many hands included with this figure. The one hand that does want to hold this properly is the energy sword hand, so that is weird that the wrong hand works on the Pulse Carbine and not the trigger finger one, but just it is what it is, I guess. Second issue that I do have with this figure and its interaction with the Pulse Carbine is it's kind of a pain in the ass to get him to hold the Pulse Carbine with two hands because of the blade on his robotic arm. The blade gets in the way of the Pulse Carbine, and it's just a whole nightmare. And it's not impossible, but it's just a hassle to do. And the real kicker after all of this, the Spartan figures have no issue holding the Pulse Carbine. It doesn't wobble, it doesn't fall out, it's just they hold it perfectly, and I think that's ironic seeing that this weapon comes with an Elite. And you think the Elite weapon would fit better in the Elite's hands. But despite all my nitpicking and bitching, I do think that this is a good looking Pulse Carbine with the paint and sculpt. And finally, the additional hands included, starting off with the biological ones. He has one open hand, one holding hand, one energy sword hand, and one trigger finger. And for the three robotic hands, we have a open hand, a holding hand, and a trigger finger hand as well. But good luck having them hold the Pulse Carbine with the blades on. With accessories now all out of the way, we can go over the visual presentation of this figure. Now, the visual presentation of this figure for the most part is really good. I really love the sculpt, all the tiny little details, all the little lines and bends and curves, and they got all the battle damage on the one side of his body, and just that attention to detail is really awesome to see. I love it, and I just can't get over how good that looks. And then the paint job for the most part is really good. The armor, just it looks worn, it looks used. There's scratches, there's dents, there's marks, and then the banished markings they got down good. The only issue I do have with the paint job is his head or his face. It is very gross. In the game, he's kind of like this undead zombie-ish looking Elite, and the figure presentation does not portray that very well. He just kind of has this normal Elite skin tone that just kind of just is really bright in contrasts with his armor, where his skin was dark, at just as dark as his armor, and just yeah, no, I think it just kind of looks gross. They could have added some weathering, some black wash to it to make it look like he was more dead. And then his eyeballs are just lifeless yellow circles with no pupils. But after that, I think they did a phenomenal job with the paint job everywhere else. And my final verdict on this figure's visual presentation is that this is a good looking figure, sculpt and paint. Just the only issue is his face and head just kind of looks unfinished. It looks like they have some more details to add. And with that out of the way, let's do some size comparisons to put this bad boy in scale. And first up, we have the Spartan Collection Arbiter, and the reason why I believe he is a little shorter than Jega is because he has the spring in his torso that keeps him from standing upright and just kind of keeps him on a hunch, where Jega does not have that spring. I probably should have mentioned that much earlier on in the video. Then we have Jazwares Spartan Collection Halo Infinite Master Chief, and then we have the World of Halo Infinite Master Chief, and just, he's a little guy. He's just chilling there right next to Jega. Then we have NECA's Xenomorph Warrior, NECA's Lost Armored Predator, Hasbro Star Wars The Black Series Imperial Crosshair, and finally McFarlane's The Doomslayer. Here we are at the turntable segment of the video. This is where I go over what I like about the figure, just give my basic thoughts, strength, and weaknesses that this figure holds, at least in my opinion. And we're going to go over the weaknesses of this figure first, just to get that sour stuff out of the way. Starting off with the articulation in the head, torso, and feet area of the figure. Now, I feel like there's a lot to left be desired here. I feel like that if there was a wider range of motion in these three areas, the figure would benefit greatly, but unfortunately these three areas are very stiff and very limited when it comes to their range of motion, and it just sucks to see. Then the second one that comes to mind is the ability or the inability to remove the blades on his robotic arm. I feel like he would benefit greatly from this. You can get a lot more out of the pulse carbine and just other accessories. You can have him hold two things or have him dual wield something, or just, you know, I feel like it's just such an easy thing. Just have a peg hole system to easily remove and attach the blades, but I just don't know why they decided to keep the blades permanently on his robotic arm, even though in the game, like I said, you see them, you know, ignite and, you know, turn off. Then these next two weaknesses retain to the pulse carbine. It's a hassle to get him to hold it with two hands because of the blade always being turned on the robotic arm, and then he can't hold the rifle securely with most hands. You know, he has to use the energy sword hand rather than the trigger finger hand. I just think that it's weird that the elite is having an issue holding an elite weapon. And the final weakness I see with this figure is the paint job on his face. It just doesn't look good. It looks like they're missing a lot of details, a lot of wear, a lot of tears, and the pupils aren't even there. I just feel like they could have done a little better with his face. And then going into the strength of this figure, starting off with the spring no longer being in the torso, so he isn't forced to just hunch over and lean forward like with the Arbiter figure. You can have him stand upright, stand up straight, and just have him, you know, do a lot more with that spring now removed. Then these next series of strengths all retain to the visual presentation of this figure. I feel like they did a great job with the paint job for the most part, just with all the wear and tear, the scratches on his armor, all the banished symbols and all that. I feel like they did a really good job with. And then with the sculpting and just the amount of little details they got looks really good, especially the battle damage on the side where his robotic arm is. I feel like they did a really good job at getting his armor down, and even the sculpting on the face, despite the paint job being very iffy, they got the wrinkles, they got his ears and everything. So I feel like they did a really good job sculpting this figure and making his paint job for the most part look really good. So my final verdict on this figure is, despite it being an action figure and you can do whatever the fuck you want with your action figures, I feel like for me personally this is more of a display figure rather than a play figure, seeing that he can't really handle the pulse rifle all too well, and then he always has the blades on his robotic arms, you know, ignited, so you can't really, you know, have him do anything with that arm except for showing off the wrist blades. And then the pulse carbine, you know, it's just a hassle to get him to hold it, but I feel like once you get him to hold it, you're just gonna display him with it and not ever touch him again unless you have him with the energy sword, which he holds just fine. So I feel like due to all the limitations and hassle with his hands and the weapons, I feel like you're just gonna find that perfect pose and display him and keep him like that and not play with him at all. But like I said, it's an action figure. You're allowed to do whatever the fuck you want with it. If you want to play with it more than display with it, go ahead, you know, live that dream. Good for you, power to you. but for me personally, I'm gonna display him more than tinker and play with him. And with all that said, do you have this figure? What do you like? What do you dislike about this figure? Comment down below, start a discussion. I like talking about this stuff, so I'll most likely respond to your comments because, like I said, I like talking about this stuff. But let's move on to the outro. So if you did like this video, a like and a subscription would be awesome. You don't have to comment because that's a lot of effort, but I do like talking about this stuff, so if you want to branch off, by all means. And don't worry about the bell. We both know that shit is broken, and if you want to see more content like this, there's plenty of it up on the channel. I do Hasbro stuff, I do NECA stuff, and of course I do Halo stuff as well, so if any of that interests you, you're more than welcome to go check it out. And I hope you have a great day, and please stay hydrated.